The evening sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Harrington Music Academy, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. It was almost 8 o'clock, and the last of the students had left nearly an hour ago. The only sounds in the grand practice hall were the soft swish of a mop across the floor and the occasional splash of water in a bucket. Lin Wang paused her work, straightening her tired back as she gazed at the magnificent grand piano that dominated the center of the room. At 42, her body carried the weight of years spent cleaning other people's spaces, offices, homes, and for the past 3 years, this prestigious music academy. The piano gleamed under the fading light, almost calling to her. Lin glanced around nervously, confirming she was alone before setting her mop against the wall. She approached the instrument carefully, as if it might disappear if she moved too quickly. Her fingers, rough from years of harsh cleaning chemicals and hard work, hovered over the keys without touching them. She'd never dared to play any of the Academy's instruments, though the temptation gnawed at her daily. "Mom, you're still here?" a voice called from the doorway. Lin jumped back from the piano, her heart racing as if she'd been caught stealing. "May, you startled me. What are you doing here so late?" Her daughter, 20 years old and dressed in the uniform of the cafe where she worked part-time, crossed the room with a small bag of takeout food. "I brought you dinner. Thought you might be hungry." She glanced at the piano, then back at her mother with a knowing smile. "Were you finally going to play?" Lin shook her head quickly. No. Just cleaning around it." She hurried back to her mop, plunging it into the bucket with unnecessary force, sending small waves of soapy water over the rim. May set the food down on a chair and leaned against the wall, watching her mother resume her work. "You know, Mr. Hartley wouldn't mind if you played. He seems nice." "The instruments are for students and faculty only," Lin replied, the words automatic after years of reminding herself of boundaries she shouldn't cross. "Besides, it's been too long. I've forgotten everything. That's not what I heard last month when you played at Mrs. Zhang's birthday on that old upright. You had everyone in tears with that Chopin piece." Lin continued mopping, her movements more vigorous than necessary. "That was different. That was just for friends. This is Harrington. People pay thousands of dollars to study here." And she had once been one of those people briefly, before life took an unexpected turn, before dreams were set aside for practicality, before her husband left, before the bills piled up, before raising May alone became her only priority. "Did you see the flyer?" May asked suddenly, changing the subject with a casualness that immediately made Lin suspicious. "What flyer?" May pulled a slightly crumpled paper from her bag and smoothed it out. "They're having an open recital night next month. Anyone from the community can sign up to perform. It says right here, to foster musical appreciation and discover hidden talent in our community." Lin glanced at the flyer without taking it. "That's nice. The students will enjoy having a bigger audience." "It's not just for students, Mom, it's open to everyone. You could sign up." A short laugh escaped Lin's lips before she could stop it. "Don't be ridiculous. Me performing here? Why not? You were conservatory trained. You had a scholarship." 25 years ago, Lin corrected, resuming her mopping. "Before you were even born?" "That life, that person. She's gone." May sighed, folding the flyer and putting it back in her bag. "Well, think about it at least. I have to get back to work. Don't forget to eat." After her daughter left, Lin finished cleaning the practice hall in silence. As she gathered her supplies to move to the next room, she paused once more by the piano. With a quick glance toward the door, she set down her bucket and sat at the bench. The keys felt cool beneath her fingertips. She didn't press down, just let her hands remember the feel of a quality instrument. Her old electronic keyboard at home, purchased second-hand years ago, couldn't compare to this masterpiece of craftsmanship. She closed her eyes, imagining the sound that would emerge if she dared to play. "Still here, Mrs. Wang?" Lin jumped up so quickly she nearly knocked over the bench. Mr. Hartley, the Academy's director, stood in the doorway with his briefcase. "I'm sorry, I'm almost finished," she stammered, hurrying back to her cleaning supplies. "No rush," he said kindly. "I just forgot some papers in my office. Don't mind me." He paused, looking at her with curiosity. "Do you play?" Lin shook her head quickly. "No, not really. Just admiring the instrument." He nodded, seeming to accept her answer, and continued toward his office. "Well, good night then." "Good night, Mr. Hartley," she replied, relief flooding through her. At home that night, In the small two-bedroom apartment she shared with May, Lynn sat at her old keyboard after dinner. She plugged in headphones so she wouldn't disturb the neighbors and played softly, her fingers remembering what her mind tried to forget. Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, the classical pieces she'd mastered as a young woman came back to her, albeit rustily. After an hour of practice, her fingers moved to something different, her own composition. It had no name, just a melody that had lived in her head for years, evolving as her life changed. She played it now, adding new elements that reflected her current state of mind. Hope mingled with resignation, pride alongside shame. The next morning, Lynn found an envelope taped to her locker at the academy. Inside was an application form for the community recital night with a sticky note attached. "You should share your talent." Lynn shook her head, tucking the form into her pocket. Her daughter was persistent, but Lynn knew better than to embarrass herself in front of the academy's elite. She'd seen how the faculty looked at the cleaning staff, with polite indifference at best. The thought of standing on their stage, being judged by their standards, made her stomach churn. Throughout the day, as she cleaned practice rooms and bathrooms, emptied trash cans and restocked supplies, the form seemed to burn a hole in her pocket. By late afternoon, she found herself in the main recital hall where the event would be held. It was empty now, the rows of seats facing the grand stage with its magnificent concert piano. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Lynn turned to find Mrs. Patel, one of the kinder faculty members who taught music theory. "Yes, very beautiful," Lynn agreed, quickly resuming her dusting. "I saw your name on the community recital list," Mrs. Patel said casually. "I didn't know you played." Lynn froze. My name?" Mrs. Patel nodded. "It was submitted yesterday. You're scheduled for the second half of the program." Heat rushed to Lynn's face. May. It had to be her. "There's been a mistake. I didn't sign up." "Oh, well, you should speak to the office then. Although," Mrs. Patel paused, "I'd be curious to hear you play. Sometimes the most beautiful music comes from unexpected places." After Mrs. Patel left, Lynn stood rooted to the spot, a mix of anger and panic rising in her chest. She marched directly to the administrative office, intending to remove her name from the list, but stopped short at the door. Through the glass, she could see Mr. Hartley talking excitedly with someone she recognized immediately from posters around the academy. Maestro Gregory, the world-renowned conductor who would be the guest of honor at the recital. Lynn backed away slowly. She couldn't go in there now, couldn't face them. She would talk to May first, make her daughter understand why this was impossible. That evening, when confronted, May was unapologetic. "You need this, Mom. You've spent your whole life taking care of me, putting your dreams aside. It's time you remembered who you are." "I know exactly who I am," Lynn replied, her voice tight with emotion. "I'm a cleaning woman. I'm your mother. That's enough for me, is it? Then why do you still play every night after you think I'm asleep? Why do you clip every article about piano competitions and concerts? Why do you watch online performances with tears in your eyes?" Lynn had no answer. The truth was, music had never left her heart, even as life had forced her hands away from the keys and toward more practical tools. Mops, brooms, scrub brushes. Over the next 2 weeks, Lynn wavered between determination to withdraw from the recital and a tiny growing spark of courage to participate. She practiced at home more seriously, working on a piece by Debussy that had once been her signature performance. But each time she made progress, doubt would creep in. Who was she to perform alongside talented students and faculty? 3 days before the recital, Lynn finally went to the administrative office to remove her name. The secretary looked up at her with a smile. "Mrs. Wong, we've been wondering what you'll be playing. We need it for the printed program." "Actually, I came to withdraw my name. I won't be participating." The secretary's smile faltered. "Oh, but the maestro specifically mentioned looking forward to hearing the community participants. He believes music belongs to everyone, not just those who can afford formal training." Lynn hesitated, those words striking a chord within her. "He said that?" "Yes, it's part of his philosophy. That's why he agreed to attend our little recital in the first place." Lynn left without withdrawing, conflicted once again. That night, as she cleaned the academy's main hall, she found herself drawn once more to the piano. This time, with the building empty and her courage bolstered by the maestro's words, she sat down and began to play, softly at first, then with growing confidence. Her composition flowed from her fingers, emotions pouring out through the music, the struggle of raising a child alone, the disappointment of abandoned dreams, the quiet dignity of work others looked down upon, and beneath it all, the persistent hope that never quite died. So absorbed was she in the music that she didn't notice the figure standing in the shadows by the door, listening intently until the last note faded away. The recital was now just days away, and Lin Wang, invisible for so long, would soon step into the spotlight, whether she was ready or not. The day of the recital arrived with an unusual chill for early autumn. Lin woke before her alarm, her sleep having been fragmented by dreams of forgotten notes and silent pianos. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her stomach knotted with a mixture of dread and something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. "Are you up, Mom?" May called from the kitchen, the smell of coffee drifting through their small apartment. "Yes," Lin answered, though she made no move to get out of bed. Perhaps if she stayed there long enough, the day would simply pass her by. The recital would happen without her, and life would continue as it always had, predictable, safe, unremarkable. May appeared in the doorway, already dressed in a pretty blue dress Lin had never seen before. "I made breakfast, and I ironed your good dress, the navy one with the small flowers." Lin sat up slowly. "You bought a new dress? We can't afford—" "It was on sale," May interrupted with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Lin recognized that look, the same one she'd worn herself when telling May that dinner was special, not just leftovers from the restaurant where she'd once worked nights. Besides, it's a special occasion. Lin swung her legs over the side of the bed. "I still don't understand why you did this to me." May sat beside her mother, their shoulders touching. "Because every time you clean those practice rooms, I see the way you look at those pianos. Like they're old friends you're not allowed to speak to." She took Lin's hand, running her thumb over the calluses. "These hands weren't meant just for cleaning, Mom." Lin squeezed her daughter's fingers but said nothing. What could she say? That, at 42, she was too old for dreams? That people like them didn't belong on stages? That she was terrified? All these things were true, and yet as she showered and dressed, as she ate the breakfast May had prepared, as they boarded the bus to the academy, another truth emerged. A part of her, buried deep beneath years of practicality and resignation, wanted this chance. The academy looked different that evening. String lights had been hung along the pathway to the entrance, and a banner announcing the community recital night fluttered in the breeze. People in evening wear streamed through the doors, students, parents, faculty, and neighbors from the surrounding community. Lin and May arrived an hour before the program was set to begin, as instructed in the participant information sheet that had been placed in Lin's locker. They were directed to a side entrance used by performers. "Family members can wait in the lobby," the student volunteer at the door told them with a cursory glance. "I'm performing," Lin said quietly, showing her name on the participant list. The student looked up, surprise flickering across his face as he recognized her. "Oh, Mrs. Wang. That's great. You can go right through to the green room." Lin felt her cheeks burn as she said goodbye to May, who squeezed her hand and whispered, "You'll be amazing." The green room was filled with other performers, mostly students in formal attire, a few community members looking as out of place as Lin felt. She found a corner chair and sat down, clutching her sheet music, the Debussy piece she had decided on after abandoning the idea of playing her own composition. That had been a moment of madness, playing her personal music in an empty hall. This was different. This was public. This required something proven, something safe. "Participants, may I have your attention, please?" called a woman Lin recognized as the recital coordinator. "Maestro Gregory has arrived and would like to say a few words before the performance." A hushed excitement fell over the room as the famous conductor entered. He was smaller in person than he appeared in the posters around the academy. A man in his 60s with silver hair and keen eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Good evening, musicians," he began with a warm smile. "I want to thank you all for sharing your gifts tonight. Music is the universal language that bridges all divides, age, background, circumstance. His gaze swept the room, not lingering on anyone in particular. Tonight, play not for judgment, but for joy. Remember why you first fell in love with music. His words should have been comforting, but they only made Lynn more nervous. When had she first fallen in love with music? So long ago, sitting on her grandmother's lap as ancient hands guided her tiny fingers across piano keys in their home in Taiwan, before the move to America, before the weight of being the family's hope for a better future settled on her shoulders. As the maestro left, an assistant handed out the printed programs. Lynn found her name near the end, third to last performer of the night. She would be following a violin prodigy and preceding a faculty piano duet. Her mouth went dry. The audience was being seated now. She could hear the murmur of voices through the walls. The coordinator began organizing them by performance order, and those in the first half were led out to reserved seats in the audience. Lynn found herself in the front row, clutching her program like a lifeline. May waved from a few rows back, giving her a thumbs up. The lights dimmed, the director of the academy made a brief welcome speech, and then the performances began. The talent on display was intimidating. Students performed pieces by Mozart, Bach, and Chopin with technical precision that made Lynn's practice sessions seem amateurish by comparison. The community participants were also impressive. A local choir director played a Liszt piece with dramatic flair, and an elderly man who introduced himself as a retired piano teacher performed a Beethoven sonata from memory. During intermission, Lynn retreated to the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. In the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. The navy dress that had once been her pride now seemed plain compared to the elegant attire around her. Her hair, neatly pinned back, was streaked with more gray than she'd realized. When had that happened? When had she become this woman, this stranger with worry lines and tired eyes? Are you all right? Lynn turned to find one of the faculty members, a young woman who taught cello, looking at her with concern. Yes, thank you, just a bit nervous. The woman smiled kindly. First performance here? Lynn nodded. First performance anywhere in a very long time. Well, the acoustic in the hall is lovely. It will make you sound even better. She patted Lynn's arm before leaving. Good luck. The second half began, and Lynn's anxiety grew with each passing performance. The violin prodigy was now on stage, a 12-year-old girl playing Vivaldi with such passion that the audience burst into spontaneous applause mid-piece. Then the coordinator was beside her, whispering, "You're next, Mrs. Wong. Please wait by the stage entrance." Lynn rose on shaky legs and made her way to the side of the stage. From here she could see the maestro in the front row, his eyes closed as he absorbed the final notes of the violin piece. The audience erupted in applause as the young girl bowed, her face flushed with triumph. And now, the announcer said as the applause died down, we have Lynn Wong performing Claude Debussy's Clair de Lune. The polite applause that greeted her entrance was notably less enthusiastic than what had preceded it. Lynn felt the weight of curious stares as she crossed the stage. She caught snippets of whispered conversations. Isn't she the cleaning lady? What's she doing here? Is this some kind of charity thing? Her legs felt like lead as she approached the grand piano. Up close, it was even more magnificent than the ones she cleaned daily. A concert Steinway, its black surface reflecting the stage lights like a dark mirror. Lynn sat down, adjusting the bench with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. She placed her sheet music on the stand, then realized she'd brought the wrong pages. These were her own composition, not the Debussy piece she'd planned to play. Panic seized her. The audience was waiting. The maestro was watching. She couldn't get up and leave, couldn't explain the mistake. Lynn glanced into the audience, finding May's face, her daughter, who believed in her more than she believed in herself. Something in May's expression, a mixture of pride and fear and hope, made Lynn's decision for her. She set aside the sheet music. She didn't need it, not for what she was about to play. For a moment she sat motionless, her hands hovering over the keys as the silence in the hall grew heavier. Someone coughed. Someone else whispered. In the front row she saw Maestro Gregory shift in his seat, checking his watch. Lynn closed her eyes, shutting out the audience, the judgments, the expectations. She thought of her grandmother's hands guiding hers. She thought of the lullabies she had played for May as a baby. She thought of all the music that had lived inside her during years of silence. Then she began to play. Not Debussy, not any composer whose name appeared in the program. She played her own piece, the one that had poured out of her in empty halls and quiet apartments, the one that told her story in a way words never could. The first notes were hesitant, soft as rain on window panes, a simple melody that spoke of childhood, of innocence, of possibilities stretching endlessly before her. Then came the complications. Minor chords, unexpected turns, the melody fragmenting as life took its toll. Lynn forgot the audience, forgot her fear. Her shoulders, which had been hunched with tension, gradually relaxed as she lost herself in the music. Her hands, rough from years of labor, moved across the keys with growing confidence, drawing sounds from the Steinway that seemed to surprise even the instrument itself. In the front row, Maestro Gregory had stopped checking his watch. His head was tilted slightly, his eyes no longer on the program but on Lynn's hands as they crafted a story in sound. And though Lynn didn't see it, couldn't see it with her eyes closed in concentration, the whispers in the audience had stopped, the piece built toward its climax, not with thundering chords or technical flourishes, but with a return to the simple melody of the beginning, now transformed by all that had come before it. It spoke of resilience, of beauty found in unexpected places, of dreams deferred but not forgotten. As the final notes hung in the air, Lynn opened her eyes, suddenly aware again of where she was and what she had done. She had not played the piece she was supposed to play. She had not met the standards of this prestigious academy. She had exposed her heart to a room full of strangers who had every reason to judge her wanting. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. The silence lasted only seconds, but to Lynn, it felt eternal. She stared at her hands resting on the keys, unable to look up at the audience. What had she done? Playing her own music instead of the planned Debussy piece, it was madness, an act of either courage or foolishness. Right now she couldn't tell which. Then came a single clap. Then another. And another. The applause built slowly at first, then swelled into something Lynn had never expected. Genuine appreciation. She finally raised her eyes to see people in the audience leaning forward in their seats, some with expressions of surprise, others with unmistakable emotion on their faces. In the front row, Maestro Gregory was not just applauding but nodding, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her look away. Lynn stood shakily, giving an awkward bow before hurrying off the stage, her heart pounding in her ears louder than the continued applause. Mom, May was waiting in the wings, her eyes shining. I've never heard you play like that before. I made a mistake, Lynn whispered. I brought the wrong music. That wasn't a mistake, May insisted, gripping her mother's trembling hands. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Did you see their faces? Lynn hadn't seen much of anything beyond her own panic. She let May guide her back to their seats for the final performance of the night, the faculty piano duet that followed her. But Lynn barely heard the music. Her mind replayed her own performance, cringing at every imperfection, every hesitation, every moment where her technique had shown its years of neglect. When the recital ended and the lights came up, Lynn wanted nothing more than to slip away unnoticed. But as she and May made their way toward the exit, they found their path blocked by a small crowd of people. Mrs. Wong, it was Mrs. Patel, the music theory teacher, her eyes bright with excitement. Why didn't you tell us you were a composer? That piece was extraordinary. Before Lynn could respond, another faculty member joined them. The emotional range was remarkable, particularly that middle section. It brought tears to my eyes. I thought it was decent for an amateur effort, said an older man Lynn recognized as one of the more critical instructors. Technically unpolished, but there was something authentic about it. From him, Lynn realized this was high praise indeed. More people gathered, asking questions she didn't know how to answer. Where had she studied? What was the piece called? Did she have other compositions? Lynn stammered through responses, overwhelmed by the attention. These were people who had walked past her 100 times while she mopped floors, never seeing her. And now they were looking at her, really looking, as if she were someone worth noticing. Mrs. Wong. A hush fell over the small crowd as Maestro Gregory approached. Up close, his piercing eyes were even more intimidating. A moment of your time, please. The crowd parted and Lynn followed the maestro to a quieter corner of the lobby, May close behind her. Lynn wiped her palms nervously against her dress, certain he was going to reprimand her for deviating from the program. That piece, he began, his voice carrying the slight accent of his Eastern European homeland. It has no title? Lynn shook her head. No, it's just something I play sometimes. Something you wrote? Yes. There was no point denying it. The maestro studied her face. You are not a student here. No. Lynn hesitated, then admitted, I clean the practice rooms. If he was surprised, he didn't show it. And your training? I had a scholarship to the conservatory, many years ago, but I had to leave after 2 years. She didn't elaborate on the reasons, her father's illness, the family's mounting medical bills, the tough choices that followed. Yet you continued to play. When I could. I have a keyboard at home. Maestro Gregory nodded slowly. The piece tells a story. Your story, I think. Lynn felt exposed, as if the maestro had read private pages of a diary she'd never actually written. Music is how I remember things. Yes, exactly. He smiled, a genuine warmth spreading across his usually stern features. That's what music should be. Not just notes on a page, but memory, experience, life. He turned to Mr. Hartley, who had joined them. This woman has a gift that shouldn't be cleaning floors. Lynn felt her face flush. It's honest work, she said defensively. Of course it is, the maestro agreed. But it's not your only talent. He turned back to Mr. Hartley. Doesn't the academy have a community outreach program? Scholarships for promising adult students? Mr. Hartley nodded. We do, though it's usually for teaching credentials. Make an exception, the maestro said firmly. I want to hear more from Mrs. Wong. He handed Lynn his card. And send me a recording of that piece when you've polished it. My orchestra is always looking for new voices. Lynn stared at the card in her hand, unable to process what was happening. I don't understand. You will, he said, then added more gently, seeing her confusion. Music like yours doesn't come along often. Mrs. Wong. Even those of us who have spent our lives in concert halls can recognize when something special walks onto the stage. With a slight bow, he excused himself to speak with other performers. Lynn stood frozen, the maestro's card clutched in her fingers until May gently led her toward the exit. Outside in the cool night air, Lynn finally found her voice. What just happened? May laughed, linking her arm with her mother's. I think you just got discovered. Don't be ridiculous. He was just being kind. Maestro Gregory isn't known for kindness, Mom. He once made a world-famous pianist cry during a master class. If he liked your music, it's because it deserved to be liked. They walked in silence for a while, the night settling around them as they headed toward the bus stop. Lynn's mind was a whirlwind of contradicting thoughts, disbelief at the reaction to her playing, embarrassment at being the center of attention, and beneath it all, a dangerous flicker of what might be hope. I need to call Mrs. Zhang and tell her everything, May said, breaking the silence. She'll be so proud. Don't tell anyone yet, Lynn said quickly. Nothing's really happened. The maestro was probably just, I don't know, being encouraging to the community participants. May stopped walking, turning to face her mother with unusual seriousness. Why is it so hard for you to believe that you're talented, that you deserve good things? The question hung in the air between them, uncomfortably direct. Lynn looked away, watching the headlights of passing cars slice through the darkness. When you've spent 20 years being invisible, she finally said, it's hard to believe people suddenly see you. May's expression softened. She took her mother's hand, the hand that had washed countless dishes, scrubbed innumerable floors, and tonight had created something beautiful enough to make strangers cry. I've always seen you, Mom. The words were simple but hit Lynn with unexpected force. She pulled May into a hug, holding her daughter close, not trusting herself to speak. The next morning, Lynn arrived at the academy at her usual time, wearing her usual cleaning uniform. She moved through the building with the familiar rhythm of her daily routine, emptying trash cans, wiping down surfaces, mopping floors. Yet something had shifted. The way people looked at her was different. Students who had never before acknowledged her existence now smiled and greeted her by name. Faculty members stopped to chat, asking about her musical background. Mrs. Wong, Mrs. Patel called. hurrying down the hallway with a folder in her hand. "I'm so glad I caught you. Do you have a moment?" Lynn set down her mop. "Yes, of course." Mrs. Patel handed her the folder. "The scholarship application Mr. Hartley mentioned last night. He asked me to make sure you got it." Lynn took the folder hesitantly. "I'm not sure I should apply. I have work and—" "Just fill it out," Mrs. Patel encouraged. "The worst they can say is no. Though between us," she lowered her voice conspiratorially, "I don't think they will. Not after Maestro Gregory's recommendation." After Mrs. Patel left, Lynn opened the folder. The application form was intimidating. Pages of questions about musical training, performance experience, career goals. How could she possibly fill this out? What would she write for the last 20 years? Raised daughter, cleaned houses, put dreams on hold? She closed the folder and tucked it into her supply cart. Later, she told herself. She would think about it later. When Lynn reached the main recital hall, she found a note taped to the door. Piano being tuned. Please clean after 11 a.m. It was only 9:30. Lynn moved on to the next room on her schedule, but as she worked, her thoughts kept returning to the application in her cart. By lunchtime, Lynn had cleaned all but the main hall. She ate her simple sandwich in the staff break room, deliberately avoiding eye contact with the other employees who now looked at her with curious interest, rather than their usual indifference. When she finally entered the recital hall, she found the piano tuner just finishing up. He nodded to her as he closed the lid of the grand piano. "All yours," he said, "though it seems a shame to clean it when it sounds so good." He winked at her, another person who had apparently heard about last night's performance. Alone in the hall, Lynn moved through her cleaning routine, deliberately keeping her back to the piano. Yet she could feel its presence like a magnet pulling at her when she had finished everything else. The floors mopped, the seats dusted, the windows cleaned. She allowed herself to approach it. The polished black surface reflected her face. A woman in a cleaner's uniform, hair pulled back in a practical bun, eyes tired but holding something that hadn't been there a day ago. Lynn glanced at the door, then sat down on the bench just for a moment. Her fingers found the keys without conscious thought. The same piece from last night emerged. But this time Lynn played with more confidence, adding nuances she hadn't dared attempt on stage. The melody soared through the empty hall, filling the space with emotions too complex for words. Pride and regret, hope and fear, the weight of years spent denying a fundamental part of herself. So lost was she in the music that she didn't notice the door opening, didn't see Mr. Hartley step inside, didn't hear him cross the hall until he spoke. "I think," he said quietly as the final notes faded, "we're going to need to adjust your job description." "Mrs. Wong," Lynn's hands froze on the keys. She turned to find Mr. Hartley standing a few feet away, a thoughtful expression on his face. She stood quickly, smoothing her uniform. "I'm sorry," she said automatically. "I know I shouldn't." Mr. Hartley raised a hand to stop her apology. "Please don't apologize for making something beautiful." He walked closer, his footsteps echoing in the empty hall. "I've been thinking about what Maestro Gregory said last night. He rarely takes an interest in new composers, you know." Lynn looked down, uncomfortable with the implied compliment. He was just being kind. "Kindness is not one of his notable qualities," Mr. Hartley said with a small smile. "Musical genius, yes. Brutal honesty, certainly. But kindness? No, Mrs. Wong. If he expressed interest in your music, it was genuine." He gestured to the piano bench, inviting her to sit back down. After a moment's hesitation, Lynn did, and Mr. Hartley took a seat in the front row facing her. "Did Mrs. Patel give you the scholarship application?" Lynn nodded. "Yes, but I don't think—" "Before you decide," he interrupted gently, "I'd like to make a proposal." He leaned forward, clasping his hands. "The Academy has been discussing a new program, music education for the community. Adult lessons, children from underserved neighborhoods, that sort of thing. We have the space and the instruments, but we need instructors who understand that music isn't just for the privileged few." Lynn watched him carefully, unsure where this was leading. "Your performance last night demonstrated not just technical skill, but something more important, the ability to communicate emotion through music. That can't be taught, not really." He paused. "We'd like to offer you a position, part-time to start. You would continue your regular duties, but for 3 afternoons a week you would teach beginning piano to community students." Lynn's mouth opened in surprise. Teach, but I don't have a degree or a teaching certificate, or you have something more valuable. Life experience and genuine talent. The formal qualifications can come later if you accept the scholarship. Mr. Hartley's expression was earnest. Think about it. The position includes reduced tuition for the adult education program here. You could complete your formal training while teaching. Lynn's mind raced. It seemed impossible. A cleaning woman becoming a piano teacher at the prestigious Harrington Academy. And yet Mr. Hartley was watching her with expectation, as if her answer mattered to him. What about my current schedule? I can't afford to lose hours. We would adjust your cleaning duties accordingly with no reduction in pay. He stood. Sleep on it. Talk to your daughter. Let me know by the end of the week. After he left, Lynn remained at the piano, her fingers resting lightly on the keys without pressing them. The silence of the empty hall pressed around her, filled with possibilities she had long ago stopped allowing herself to imagine. That evening, when Lynn told May about Mr. Hartley's offer, her daughter's reaction was exactly what she'd expected. Pure joy. Mom, this is amazing. You have to say yes. May was practically bouncing on their small couch. It's not that simple, Lynn said, though she couldn't help but smile at her daughter's enthusiasm. Going back to school at my age. And teaching? I don't know the first thing about teaching. You taught me, May pointed out. And I'm not terrible, it was true. Lynn had given May basic piano lessons on their old keyboard, starting when she was just 5 years old. May had a decent grasp of music, though she'd never shown the passion for it that Lynn had at her age. That's different. You're my daughter, so? The principles are the same. Besides, May added with a sly grin, it's not like they're asking you to teach the advanced students. Just beginners, Lynn sighed, sinking down beside her daughter. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? May took her mother's hand. What if you fly? The simple question hung in the air between them. Lynn looked around their small apartment, the worn furniture, the carefully patched curtains, the keyboard that had been her only connection to music for so many years. It wasn't much, but they had made it home. Would chasing this new opportunity put even this modest security at risk? As if reading her thoughts, May squeezed her hand. Sometimes safe isn't enough, Mom. Sometimes you have to take a chance. Lynn looked at her daughter, this wise young woman who had grown up watching her mother make the practical choice, the safe choice time and time again. Perhaps it was time to show her another way. Okay, she said quietly. I'll try. 3 days later, Lynn signed the paperwork for her new position and submitted the scholarship application. The following Monday, she arrived at the academy with 2 bags, one containing her cleaning supplies, the other holding sheet music and teaching materials she had spent the weekend preparing. The transition wasn't smooth. Mornings were still dedicated to cleaning, and Lynn found herself rushing to change into more professional attire before her afternoon teaching sessions. The other faculty members were polite but distant, clearly unsure what to make of the cleaning woman who now sat with them in staff meetings. Her first students were a mix of neighborhood, children whose parents couldn't afford private lessons, and adults who had always wanted to learn but never had the opportunity. Lynn was terrified the first time she sat down with 8-year-old Tommy, a fidgety boy whose mother worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over their heads. Have you ever played before? Lynn asked him, trying to keep her voice steady. Tommy shook his head, eyeing the piano with suspicion. My friend said it's boring. It can be, Lynn admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. When you're first learning, it's like learning a new language. It takes time before you can say anything interesting. The boy considered this. My mom says I talk too much already. Lynn laughed, her nervousness easing slightly. Well, this is a different kind of talking. Here, let me show you. She placed her hands on the keys and played a simple, playful melody she had composed that morning with Tommy in mind. The boy's eyes widened. Can you teach me that? Eventually, Lynn promised. Let's start with the basics. By the end of the first month, Lynn had settled into a routine. Mornings for cleaning, afternoons for teaching, evenings for her own studies and practice. It was exhausting but exhilarating. For the first time in decades, she was using her mind in ways that challenged and fulfilled her. Her adult students particularly responded to her approach. Lynn didn't have the traditional teaching methods of her colleagues, but she understood something they didn't: the fear of failure that kept adult beginners from taking risks, from truly expressing themselves through music. Don't worry about playing the wrong note, she told Maria, a 50-something nurse who tensed up every time she made a mistake. Think about what you're trying to say with the music. The notes are just words. It's the feeling behind them that matters. Word began to spread about Mrs. Wong's class, where students learned not just technique but expression. Her waiting list grew, much to the surprise of some faculty members who had doubted the wisdom of Mr. Hartley's decision. 6 weeks into the new arrangement, Lynn found a note in her faculty mailbox, something she still couldn't believe she had. Please see me after your last class today. Maestro Gregory Lynn's heart raced. She had almost forgotten that the renowned conductor was still in residence at the academy, working with the advanced students. Had he heard complaints about her unorthodox teaching methods? Was he regretting his earlier enthusiasm for her playing? Throughout her afternoon classes, Lynn was distracted, making small mistakes she would normally never make. When the last student left, she took a deep breath, straightened her simple blouse, and made her way to the maestro's temporary office. He was writing something when she knocked. His silver head bent over the desk. Come in, Mrs. Wong, he said without looking up. Just finishing a thought. Lynn waited silently, trying to calm her nerves. The office was austere. The academy had provided only the basics for his short residency. But even so, it felt intimidating. Certificates and awards in elegant frames lined one wall, while stacks of musical scores covered most available surfaces. Finally, the maestro set down his pen and looked up at her. I heard you playing yesterday, he said without preamble. The new piece. The one about the river. Lynn blinked in surprise. She had indeed been working on a new composition, something that had come to her during a rare moment of quiet, inspired by a childhood memory of playing by a river near her grandmother's house. But she had only played it once late in the evening when she thought the building was empty. You've been composing more, he continued, not waiting for her response. Good. Your voice is distinctive. Thank you, Lynn said, uncertain whether that was a compliment. I mentioned your work to some colleagues. He handed her a business card. This woman runs a small publishing house specializing in new classical compositions. She'd like to hear your music. Lynn stared at the card. Publishing? My music isn't. I've never formally studied composition. The maestro made an impatient gesture. Formal study can come later. What matters is that you have something to say. He fixed her with his intense gaze. Do you have a recording of your recital piece? The one you played that first night? Lynn shook her head. No, but I could. I could make one. Do that. Send it to her. He turned back to his work, then seemed to remember something. Oh, and the orchestra's annual New Voices concert is in 3 months. I've put your name forward. For what? Lynn asked, confused. The maestro looked up, a rare smile softening his stern features. To compose something for us, of course. Something short, 5 minutes perhaps. A taste of your voice for the audience. Seeing her stunned expression, he added, Only if you want to. But I think you do. Lynn left the office in a daze, the publisher's card clutched in her hand. The hallway seemed to tilt slightly beneath her feet, as the magnitude of what was happening began to sink in. Her music, published. Performed by a professional orchestra. It was too much, too fast. She found herself at the piano in the now empty recital hall, sitting down more out of habit than conscious decision. Her fingers moved across the keys, finding a melody that expressed the tumult of emotions inside her. Disbelief, fear, and beneath it all a growing sense of rightness, as if her life had been a puzzle with pieces in the wrong places, now finally shifting into their proper alignment. As she played, Lynn became aware of someone watching. She looked up to find one of her colleagues, Dr. Rivera, the stern theory teacher who had never so much as nodded to her during her years as the cleaning staff. That's quite beautiful, he said, his usual crisp tone softened by genuine appreciation. Your own composition? Lynn nodded, suddenly self-conscious. It has elements of Chen Yi in it, the way you blend Eastern and Western influences. But the voice is distinctly your own. He stepped closer. I understand from Mr. Hartley that you'll be joining our theory class next semester as a student. Yes, Lynn confirmed. I have a lot to learn. Dr. Rivera smiled, surprising her. And much to teach, I suspect. The students have been talking about your classes. Your approach is unconventional, but effective. He hesitated, then added, if you'd like some guidance with formal composition techniques. My office hours are on Thursdays. After he left, Lynn remained at the piano, her hands resting on the keys. 6 weeks ago, Dr. Rivera wouldn't have noticed if she'd disappeared entirely. Now he was offering to mentor her. She began to play again, adding a new section to the piece, something hopeful, looking forward rather than back. As she played, Lynn's posture changed, her shoulders straightening, her chin lifting. The woman who had spent decades hunched over mops and buckets, trying to make herself invisible, was vanishing. In her place emerged someone new, or perhaps someone who had been there all along, waiting for the chance to stand in the light. Later that evening, as she packed up her things to head home, Lynn caught a glimpse of herself in the reflection of the window. For a moment she didn't recognize the woman staring back at her, this person with bright eyes and an easiness to her smile that hadn't been there before. Mrs. Wong? One of the evening security guards poked his head into the room. Just checking who was still here. You're working late tonight. Lynn smiled at him. Yes, she said, the word carrying a weight of truth that went beyond his simple observation. Yes, I am. 3 months passed in a blur of lessons, practice, and late nights hunched over manuscript paper. Lynn divided her life into clear segments now. Mornings for cleaning. She had insisted on keeping some shifts despite Mr. Hartley's offer to release her entirely. Afternoons for teaching and every spare moment for composing the piece Maestro Gregory had commissioned for the New Voices concert. The work consumed her. Lynn had never attempted to write for a full orchestra before, and the learning curve was steep. Dr. Rivera's Thursday mentoring sessions became a lifeline, his initial professional courtesy warming into genuine respect as he guided her through the technical aspects of orchestration. The strings should double this melody line, he suggested one evening, pointing to a passage Lynn had been struggling with. It will give it the weight it needs without overwhelming the woodwind response. Lynn made the notation, then played back the passage in her mind. Yes, that works better. Thank you. Dr. Rivera studied her with thoughtful eyes. You know, when Mr. Hartley first told the faculty about your new position, many of us were skeptical. Lynn looked up, not entirely surprised. Because I was the cleaning woman. Partly that, he admitted, but mostly because teaching requires more than just talent. It requires patience, insight, the ability to communicate complex ideas simply. He smiled. Qualities you apparently have in abundance, according to your students. Lynn felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected praise. I'm just trying to give them what I never had. Someone who believes they can do it no matter where they come from. Dr. Rivera nodded. That's precisely why your students are thriving. He gathered his papers, their session coming to an end. How is the commission coming along? The concert is only 3 weeks away. Lynn sighed, looking at her score with critical eyes. It's almost finished, but I'm not sure it's good enough. These other composers on the program, they have degrees, years of experience. And you have life, Dr. Rivera said simply. Music isn't created in a vacuum. The most technically perfect composition can leave an audience cold if it lacks heart. He tapped her score. This has heart. Trust that. At home, Lynn's relationship with May had shifted in subtle ways. Her daughter watched with quiet pride as Lynn blossomed, transforming their small apartment with her newfound energy. Sheet music covered the dining table. Books on music theory filled their limited shelf space, and Lynn's old keyboard had been replaced with a better model, a gift from May, purchased with savings she'd been secretly setting aside. You didn't need to do this, Lynn had protested when May presented it to her. Yes, I did, May insisted. You've spent my whole life making sacrifices for me. It's my turn now. Lynn had been too moved to argue further. Tonight, Lynn sat at the new keyboard, headphones on, as she worked through a difficult passage of her composition. The orchestra would begin rehearsals next week, and though Maestro Gregory had assured her they would follow her score exactly, she wanted everything to be perfect. So absorbed was she in her work that she didn't notice May enter the room until her daughter tapped her shoulder, causing her to startle. Sorry, May said, removing Lynn's headphones for her. There's someone here to see you. Lynn looked up confused. It was nearly 9 in the evening, and they rarely had visitors. Who? Mrs. Patel and Mr. Hartley, May replied, her eyes bright with excitement. They say it's important. Lynn quickly tidied her hair and followed May to their small living room, where the 2 Academy faculty members waited. Mrs. Patel immediately rose to greet her with a warm embrace. "We're sorry to disturb you so late," she said, "but we couldn't wait until tomorrow to share the news." Mr. Hartley held out an envelope embossed with the Academy's seal. "The board met today," he explained as Lynn took it with uncertain hands. "Open it." Lynn broke the seal and removed a formal letter. As she read, her eyes widened and she had to sit down abruptly on the arm of their worn sofa. "Is this real?" she whispered. Mr. Hartley nodded, smiling. "Very real. The Harrington Fellowship is our most prestigious award. Full tuition for the completion of your degree, plus a stipend for living expenses. And more importantly, a permanent teaching position in our community outreach program once you graduate." "But why me?" Lynn asked, still stunned. "Surely there are more qualified candidates." Mrs. Patel sat beside her. "The fellowship isn't just about qualifications on paper. It's about identifying individuals with exceptional talent who will contribute to the musical community in meaningful ways." She squeezed Lynn's hand. "Your students' progress has been remarkable. Your teaching philosophy, that music should be accessible to everyone, aligns perfectly with the values of the fellowship. And," Mr. Hartley added, "Maestro Gregory's recommendation carried significant weight. He rarely takes such interest in emerging composers." Lynn looked down at the letter again, trying to absorb the magnitude of what was happening. Financial security, a respected position, the chance to complete the education she'd abandoned decades ago. "There's a press release going out tomorrow," Mrs. Patel explained. "The local papers always cover the fellowship announcement. We wanted you to hear it from us first." After they left, Lynn sat in silence, the letter still in her hands. He brought her a cup of tea, then sat across from her, watching her mother's face. "You don't seem happy," May observed cautiously. Lynn looked up. "I'm overwhelmed. 6 months ago I was invisible, just the woman who emptied the trash and mopped the floors. Now." She gestured helplessly at the letter. "Now people see you," May finished for her. "They see what I've always seen." Lynn smiled at her daughter through suddenly watery eyes. "When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher," May replied simply. The night before the New Voices concert, Lynn couldn't sleep. She paced their small apartment, going over the score in her mind, worrying about how the audience would receive her music. The other composers on the program were established professionals with impressive credentials. Her name in the concert program would stand out starkly. Lynn Wang, her only listed qualification being Harrington Academy Fellow. When morning finally came, Lynn was exhausted, but too nervous to feel it. She dressed carefully in the new outfit May had insisted on buying for the occasion. A simple but elegant blue dress that made her feel simultaneously overdressed and underprepared. "You look beautiful." "Mom," May said as they prepared to leave for the concert hall. Lynn smoothed the unfamiliar fabric. "I look like someone trying to be something she's not." "No," May countered firmly. "You look like someone finally becoming who she was always meant to be." At the concert hall, Lynn was directed backstage where the other composers were gathered. She stood apart, feeling out of place among these confident professionals with their easy conversation and inside jokes about the music world. A young man in an expensive suit approached her. "You must be Lynn Wang," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Peter, third on the program tonight. I heard a rehearsal of your piece yesterday. It's extraordinary." Lynn shook his hand, surprised. "Thank you. That means a lot." "No, thank you," he said with unexpected sincerity, "for reminding us that great music can come from anywhere. This industry gets insular sometimes. We need voices like yours." Before Lynn could respond, Maestro Gregory appeared, calling the composers to attention for final instructions. The concert was structured simply. Each composer would briefly introduce their piece, then take a seat in the special section while the orchestra performed it. Lynn would be last, the closing piece of the evening. As the audience filed in, Lynn peeked through the curtain. The hall was full, every seat taken. She spotted May in the 5th row, alongside Mrs. Patel and Mr. Hartley. In the front row sat several music critics from major publications. The maestro had mentioned they always attended the New Voices concert, looking for fresh talent. The lights dimmed, the audience quieted, and the program began. Each piece was unique, some experimental, some traditionally classical, all showcasing impressive technical skill. Lynn listened intently, her nervousness growing with each successful performance. By the time the penultimate composer took his bow to enthusiastic applause, her hands were trembling. And now, the maestro announced. Our final piece of the evening. I had the privilege of discovering this composer quite by accident when she performed her own work at a community recital. What struck me then, and what continues to move me about her music, is its honest emotional core, a quality that cannot be taught in any conservatory. Please welcome Lin Wang, whose orchestral debut Invisible Woman will close our program tonight. Lin walked onto the stage on unsteady legs, blinking in the bright lights. The audience before her was a blur of faces. She had prepared remarks, carefully memorized, but as she stood at the microphone, different words came to her. 6 months ago, I was cleaning the practice rooms at Harrington Academy, she began, her voice surprisingly steady. For 20 years before that, I cleaned houses, offices, restaurant kitchens, wherever I could find work to support my daughter. Music was something I did in stolen moments on an old keyboard when no one was listening. She paused, finding May's face in the crowd. This piece tells that story. Not just my story, but the story of anyone who has ever felt unseen. It's about the music we carry inside us, even when the world isn't listening. Lin stepped back from the microphone and took her seat as Maestro Gregory raised his baton. In the brief silence before the first note, a strange calm settled over her. Whatever happened next, she had done something she never thought possible. She had given voice to the music that had sustained her through the hardest years of her life. The piece began softly, a single oboe playing a melancholy theme that represented her younger self, full of dreams and possibilities. The theme fractured as more instruments joined, creating dissonance and tension as life's challenges mounted. The middle section was deliberately repetitive, the same phrases circling endlessly like the years of routine that had defined her existence. But beneath this repetition, almost imperceptibly at first, a new melody began to form in the lower strings, growing stronger until it finally emerged triumphant in the full orchestra, the voice that had always been there, waiting to be heard. As the final notes faded, Lin realized she had been holding her breath. She exhaled slowly, bracing herself for polite, perhaps confused applause. Instead, the hall erupted. People rose to their feet, applauding with an enthusiasm that seemed to shake the very walls. Lin stood in shock as Maestro Gregory beckoned her to join him at the podium. As she walked to center stage, she saw something she hadn't expected. Faces in the audience wet with tears, including those of several critics in the front row. Again, the maestro whispered to her as the applause continued. They will want to hear it again. This doesn't happen often. And indeed, the applause showed no signs of dying down. The maestro raised his hands to quiet the audience. I believe, he said with a smile, that we have discovered an important new voice tonight. With your permission, we will perform Invisible Woman once more. The suggestion was met with even more enthusiastic applause. Lin returned to her seat, overwhelmed, as the orchestra prepared to play her piece a second time. As the familiar notes began again, she closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. Her music. Her story. In the darkness behind her eyelids, Lin saw not the audience or the orchestra, but a long road stretching behind her. Years of struggle, of dignity maintained through difficult circumstances, of dreams deferred but never abandoned, and ahead, a new path opening, leading to places she had never dared imagine she might go. When the performance ended for the second time, the applause was even more thunderous than before. Lin was presented with a bouquet of flowers as critics rushed the stage, eager to speak with the evening's discovery. In the resulting chaos, she locked eyes with May, who was applauding so hard it looked like it hurt, her face streaked with proud tears. Later, after interviews and congratulations, after reviewing the first gushing social media posts about her debut, Lin and May finally headed home. They walked in comfortable silence until May spoke. So, she said, bumping her shoulder gently against her mother's. Still feel invisible? Lin smiled, holding her score and flowers close to her chest. No, she said softly. Not anymore. As they waited at the bus stop, the same bus they had taken countless times over the years, to cleaning jobs in grocery stores and discount shops, Lin looked up at the stars scattered across the night sky. Each one had always been there, burning bright, whether anyone looked up to notice them or not. Just like the music inside her, some lights, she thought, never truly go out. They just wait for the right moment to be seen.